Creative Parenting with Nina Meehan is brought to you by Bay Area Children's Theater.
Today, my guest is Jeff Raz. Jeff Raz is an acclaimed playwright, stage director, and performer. He has starred on Broadway with Cirque Du Soleil and among many others, as well as an author and global communications consultant. His first book, The Secret Life of Clowns, was launched at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. in 2017. His second book, The Snow Clown, followed in 2018, and Love, Death, Circus released one chapter a week during the pandemic. He is currently writing the script for the 2021 California Rebels. And I will say that Jeff Raz is an old friend who I have had the joy of working with at Bay Area Children's Theater, where he directed for us many years ago when he was still the head of the Clown Conservatory in San Francisco. So it was such a fun thing for me to be able to chat with Jeff. I absolutely adored how he interwove conversations about his time as a Cirque Du Soleil clown, his teaching, and his parenting, and how all three elements of his life fed into each other and fueled each other, and how open he is to learning, and how all three of those different aspects of who he is as a human and a creative artist really helped him understand and learn the world of parenting, and that he's still learning every day. So enjoy Jeff. Jeff, I'm so delighted to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Fantastic to chat with you about all things creativity and parenting. You have this unbelievable background as a clown, a director, an actor, a writer. You work with corporate groups. I mean, you have this unbelievable wealth of experience in the creative genre, and you are also yourself a parent.
Yep.
And so I'm going to start with about the biggest, broadest question ever. As a person who has spent your entire career entertaining adults, families, kids, what do you see as the role of creativity, imagination, play in family dynamics?
There's so many answers. The one that just leaps into my mind is that play is learning. I remember my children, my boys are 18 and 24, and I vividly remember each of them when they were little babies. The basic needs are screaming, "I'm hungry, got to change my diaper, I'm hot, cold, or I'm tired." I mean, not a big range. And those, I thought, were the core. That's it. You don't get any more core than that. But I noticed time and time again, if there was a good game to play, all of those disappeared.
Interesting.
If the right toy came out, or there's something to do here, oh my God, that took over, even from being exhausted with a full diaper and hungry.
And we've all been there with the exhausted, full diaper and hungry.
Yeah, and our kids have been there too. But yeah, you're right.
So what I'm hearing is that play was an opportunity in your family to sort of lift above that, like those everyday moments of need, and which can often lead to sort of tension and changing the mood, changing the vibe.
And yes, and it came from my kids. I find a lot around creativity I learned from either my kids or young people or adults that I'm working with. There's usually something that I get taught in those, and it's okay. I still take my paycheck as the teacher, but I understand that the learning is often too directional and often coming my way more than the other.
I so agree. I feel like we have so much to learn from our kids, but I'm concerned sometimes that I see that we as adults, we're asked to be the experts. We're asked to be right a lot. And I know you work with a lot of companies now, like organizations that are filled with, grown adults. Can you share some thoughts on what you see as creative play and imagination right now in the adult world. Where is it thriving? Where could we as adults look for more of that?
Yeah. I'm not sure where it's thriving, though. I think over during lockdowns, there was thriving on virtual platforms where I just talked to a friend of mine who I work with in the business world, whose 13-year-old daughter is taking bass lessons, and they were entirely virtual. And now they have a system where they go 3 or 4 virtual lessons, and then they live lesson. Uh, so the bass playing is the creativity, but there's also a lot of creativity in how to learn and teach. And I'm hoping that comes flying up. I worked with a bunch of business schools at the beginning of the pandemic, and one of them was in Manila in the Philippines. And I had lunch there every day, 9 o'clock my time, but I had lunch with the faculty, and I learned so much from them. The one professor, a business professor, let's be clear on this. So he figured out how to plug his iPad in, and he had a stylus, and he wrote all over his slides. And the idea was he did not want his business students to ever think that you couldn't make a slide messy. And it was
I
a
love
deeper
that.
thought. He wanted to make sure this is going to be messy. It's not those little bullet points that you see. To me, that was a huge moment of creativity in the world of business as a business teacher. Uh, I often see creativity on the edges, which I'm sure you relate to this. And it's your job and often my job to try to say, that's a pretty recent formation, having creativity around the edges. Even 2 generations ago, creativity wasn't all around the edges. And by the edges, I mean the beginning. The beginnings or the ends of sessions. I had a woman. We were working on voice and how to use your voice, which becomes even more important virtually. And I had one of my colleagues is a wonderful actor and a South Indian singer. And I said, you're going to have to teach voice. You just got to, with some singing. So there was singing in the session, and it was made people a little nervous, but they loved it. So at the very end, one of the participants, actually our client, said, I asked her if she'd like to say something. She said, I'd like to share a song. We sang this at my grandmother's funeral. She died 3 weeks ago of COVID. And she started singing. And everything in the virtual world that we were in changed. And it was not a long song. She happens to be a wonderful singer. She could have been a terrible singer. That brought everything we were doing in terms of voice. Great, you just taught the curriculum, and it brought everyone's heart in, as you and I know is part of creativity.
I love that story because I can just picture it. I can picture how the world stopped for that moment. And that notion that creativity can be at the edges, I think that's actually really valuable for parents to be thinking about, that we don't have to dive in 24 hours a day and be
Yes.
doing 400 craft projects and acting out the play. It can be a small moment. It can be, my grandma used to sing me this song before bed. My mom used to sing me a song that was a Lulu song, and just having those moments
Yeah.
of bing, a little creativity, the world stops.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up on a word you use, it's one of my favorite words on earth, which is messy. So you spent many years in front of live audiences as a clown, and you also ran a clown school, and you were a parent. I can only imagine that messy has been a part of some of those experiences. Can you talk to me about your belief in the relationship between messy and creativity?
I don't love messy as much as you do. I always dream that everything will be neat and tidy, and that has served me in great stead, because the profession of clowning attracts a lot of people who live messy on stage and in their personal life. And I've always been very organized in the business world. Again, something you recognize, which this is not the question you asked, but those are not to be, and well-organized clown is not an oxymoron. It actually is essential for a lot of professional work. Let me answer your question though. Uh, the thought that immediately came to mind, that's what I'm going to answer, was I was touring with Cirque du Soleil, and my wife, who is a psychologist, said, well, I'm not going on tour with you. I said, that makes sense. But we decided we're going to take, it was a little more than a year, and then I actually went back on the road a couple of times. But we're going to take this time, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be messy. And it was that my kids were 4 and 9, and they came along with my mother-in-law to my opening in Atlanta, and they stayed a couple of days. And as they took the shuttle back to the airport, my wife called me from the airport to say that the older one said, Mom, can we roll down the windows to let the pain out? Oh,
Oh,
so that you can see, I remember he's 24 now, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, so I said, we were playing in Denver in the middle of the summer. I said, I'm going to take the kids for a week. I'm home we used to be able to come home in the breaks between cities. I'm going to take the kids. And it was quite a negotiation to try to figure this all out. And I hired a woman who was on tour in the costume department, and her husband was a rigger. I hired her to take care of them. And I knew that the boys would love the rigger. And everything's set up, like it's set up. Except we missed the flight because Southwest had these 2.5-hour lines that I didn't anticipate.
Oh,
And then we
no.
get there, and I have a rehearsal the next day, not a show, but a rehearsal. And my younger son, who was I guess he had just turned 5, got this, we call it the seal cough. It's that horrible cough that kids get. So I'm up in the shower, hot shower with him all night, trying to get the cough. So my friend from the costume department comes in the morning, with her husband, the rigger. The boys are thrilled. And I'm like, oh, gosh. All right. And my job involved getting hooked to a harness and flying up to the top of the tent, and they dropped me down a few times. Messy day.
Messy
Kids
day.
loved it. The kids were playing with the riggers' ropes, and I got home and they're all tied up, and this is the best thing ever. And I said, yeah, go to bed. It's bedtime now.
What I love about though is from your perspective as a parent, like this is a day that you remember, and I'm sure that like you feel yourself like immediately like constrict and like I know what that tension. And yet if I had one of your sons, like your 24-year-old, and asked about the day that he got to like get, all roped up and fly up and to tents, he probably would have been like, "Oh my God, that was so great." Like
Yep.
messy day. So in your book, Secret Life of Clowns, you talk about this existence. And I believe it was when you were on tour with Cirque du Soleil, where you had this dual life where you were both performing as a clown and simultaneously training clowns. So you ran a clown school, a phenomenal clown school. And I'm wondering, what are the through lines for you that connected your life? So you have like a performer life, a teacher life, a parent life. What are some of those through lines that maybe parents might relate to, specifically in terms of how you used your incredible creative energy?
I feel like one of the differences between teaching, performing as a block, and parenting is that you have measurable successes as a teacher and a performer. The audience applauds at the end. The students graduate at the end. Parenting, I find you better take, there's not usually the ceremony for you as a parent. It's like,
Wait. Are you saying that your kids didn't stand up and applaud at the end of every day of having the bedtime story read and the hot dogs made on time? Like that wasn't a thing that happened?
maybe I forgot. Maybe it slipped my mind. Never. I mean, my 18-year-old, I asked him when he's comparing, he was talking about other people's dads, and some of them are very rich, and said, well, what do you say about your dad? I mean, do you would say, he goes, yeah, here's how I do it. Oh God. And he gave me he goes, yeah, my dad's a clown. And then they look, and I wait a few beats, and then I say, Cirque du Soleil? Yeah. They always got one guy who's like the main guy. So that was as close to a applause that I think I've ever gotten.
That's a good one. I mean, as that goes, I think that is a round of applause from your kids. But
Yeah, he had been up all night playing Call of Duty, and it was early morning. But this is reality. But I loved it. I mean, I didn't stand up and take a bow because it would have ruined the moment. But yeah, uh, but you asked for through lines and threads. It's easy for me to see through lines between teaching and performing. And that book is really about that. There are so many. One of the things is, if you're a teacher, it's really easy to get disconnected from the experience of learning the lessons you're teaching. And that's a dangerous thing. So I had been running the school for 7 years when I went on tour. So I made a pact. I'm going to look at my performance through the lens of what I tell my students and my students. And it was really hard. I found most of what I was teaching I thought was pretty sound, but hard to do. I have a lot of sympathy for them. The key for that, and I do think it's for parenting too, it's just that much harder for parenting, is this idea. So if you're doing 385 shows a year, that means you're doing between and you have a few weeks off during the year, you're doing 8 to 10 shows a week. And the shows were 2 hours, 45 minutes. And we often did 2 a day. And I was in 13 of the acts. And I was spending 20 hours a week running my school, which was easier than working harder but raising 2 kids in the moment. Raising 2 kids on Skype long distance is easier. My wife had a harder gig that year than I did. So, but the thing is, you get bored. And I think that's true for teaching, and I think it's true for parenting, though we don't want to admit it. You're bored. So
say it again. We can get bored. It happens. Absolutely.
And that's not a great place to come from. So in Cirque du Soleil, people paying $150, $200, and I played in Japan. They were paying $250, and there's a lot of them. And for them, it's exciting and new, and it better not be boring for me. So I had to say, how am I not going to be a hack today? How am I not going to try to duplicate yesterday's show and make it kind of okay? I'm going to find something to focus on. And that's great for teaching, as I focus on each student and what they need now. And my kids, and I got 2 kids, they're both home. One just graduated from college, one just graduated from high school, and they're both at different points of their life. So it's really helpful for me to focus on, what am I going to try to do as a parent? So right now I'm trying to be a good drive-by parent. Not say, let's sit down and talk about this issue, because that goes over so well with young adults. But instead, just say, as a human being to a human being, I was rough yesterday, and then leave it and see what they say back. Now, this fits with performing, because as I get older, my skills as a juggler start to get a little weaker, and then my skills as an acrobat evaporate into space. I don't know where they went. So I need to use the audience more. So it's this, I guess that's an equivalent I make, just focusing on them. I was up early the other morning, and I had hope my 18-year-old doesn't hear it. I had I'm going to talk to him about his new job, and it was a real dad talk. And when you're half asleep, you can get these great dad. That just sounded good. And I got up, and he started talking to me about his job. And I went, oh, he loves this job. I thought he hated this job, because he said, I hate my job. He's new at it. He's talking about his boss who he likes, and he's inventing new ways to make pizza. I mean, so that's a moment where, just like a performer, what's the audience telling me? Well, what's my audience telling me? Can your speech, it's a speech to an imaginary human being who's not in front of you. Listen and say, tell me how you're going to put the pepperoni on faster. What's the device? Oh, it looks like this and this. And wow. And tell me about your boss. What did she say?
That active listening. I mean, what I'm hearing is that that's something you were doing with your students. That's something you were doing in front of an audience. It's something you're doing with your now 18-year-old. And, I have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I know that moment so well when
Yeah.
we think we know, we've played the whole story in our head of the thing we need to talk about. And then you take a step back. And if you really just take that pause and listen,
Yeah.
and I do think, as a person who's also been a teacher and a performer in different context, clearly I've not actually ever flown up to a Cirque du Soleil tent, but
I
but
could have lived
I
my whole life without doing that.
but I know that moment you're talking about where you have to find the way to make it fresh and new
Mhm.
every moment. And the way you do that is that active listening. And I
Mhm.
do think that that is completely connected to a creative spirit, because a
Yes.
creative spirit, as you said in the very beginning, is all about learning. It's about being in that
Yes.
learning mindset constantly.
And it's not, even as a teacher, it's really helpful to be in the learning mindset. And uh, I have to say, you made that sound a little too neat, and I know you like messy. So the I learned that as a clown. That's a basic concept as a clown. If a baby cries, that's more important than the gag you thought was going on. So I learned it first in that, which seems paradoxical because I learned in front of a bunch of people who could boo me and never pay me. Then I started to learn at teaching, but it's harder because teacher, the image, the word, not so helpful to really do the action. The verb, the noun doesn't help the verb. And then only recently have I been able to figure out how to do that parenting. That if you're wondering which is easier, again, being in front of 3,200 people in a tent and they're all looking at you is much, much easier than raising children for a day.
All right. That is, so to all of our listeners, in case you were ever wondering,
Yeah.
if you're intending to run away to the circus, you might be right. It actually might be easier than getting your 4-year-old to take a bath tonight. Like, that is real. So, Jeff, these days, how do you express your own creativity? I mean, we've all been in this very strange place in life where we haven't had as much opportunities for social interaction or entertainment or any of those things. How have you kept your own creative spirit alive?
That's a question many, many people were asking themselves. I thought it was going to be by participating in some Zoom stuff, like there was that exquisite corpse idea of everybody makes a video that ends in one movement and then the next person picks it up, but we're all making them separately. I did one of those. That didn't, I enjoyed it, but it didn't float my boat. It didn't do what you were just saying. What I found, you were saying about keeping your creative spirit going.
Yeah.
What I was doing was a lot of virtual trainings with people around the world in business settings. And I had I had to make some choices. I had to one say, wait a second, these people are in business. I am a consultant, but I get to choose. I'm not parking the other me at the door when I put on a better shirt. Leave on the same pajamas, but put on a better shirt. And that was huge. And I these people are creative. I get to treat them the way I treated my professional clown students, which is with love. I get to fall in love with them. And I started to find that they were feeding me. Like I was looking forward to hanging out with people back here in my office. So that change of focus, breaking down a stereotype I hate, but I didn't realize I held, which is there are suits and there are creatives. And I thought that really hurts everybody. Suits, first of all, you're defined by your clothing, and that means you don't have a heart or a spirit. And creative, that means you're not allowed to wear a suit, which actually I look better in a suit sometimes. And you're disorganized, all the things. You're just creative. You're not. And I totally bought into that without knowing it. So breaking that down and saying, no, we're all creative. Whatever we're wearing, we're all creative. And that's going to be part. I'm leading these sessions. I get to set the tone. I get to treat my colleagues. I have coaches who work with me as full artists. I get to ask them to bring your South Indian singing in. I got a former Broadway musical star. Yeah, you're singing today. Working with most of them are actors. Let's hear how you do this. Let me play director and do that, and then people will see how that works. And that got a great feeling going, and it helped me immensely.
I love hearing that that you were finding that you weren't creating something. You weren't like forcing it.
No.
You were allowing the moment of where you were to inform how you can keep those creative juices flowing and that spirit alive. And, I think that I've seen a lot of parents during this time having to do exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't hire the magician for the birthday party. In fact, I can't have the birthday party. Oh, I have an idea. I have, all of these weird paper plates in the back of my car. Let's hang them up and make a backdrop and take funny pictures. Like just that resourcefulness. Like we
Yeah.
all have it inside of us. And it's so helpful to think of it, what are the assumptions we're making about ourselves? What are the assumptions we're making about our kids? And what labels are we giving ourselves? Because you're right, those labels aren't helping any of us.
Right.
And it's all inside of us. We do have it right there for us at our fingertips. Jeff, I have just loved talking to you. I have a 3-question speed round to finish up here. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. If you could invent one completely crazy thing that does not currently exist and would have made your life as a parent easier or parents right now of young kids, what would it be?
It would be, it actually has been invented on Star Trek. It would be the transporter so that I could come off stage still in costume, be home for bedtime, read the story, and then be back for the second show, the late show.
I totally need that transporter. And you're right, it has been invented. So we'll just jump into TV land and we're all
there needs to be food on the transporter, though, just to say it. There needs to be that snack. Okay. What's next?
All right. Question number 2. What is the first creative product, like a music, book, painting, play, that you can remember feeling inspired by or connected to? So when you were young.
I'm not sure if this is the first, but it's what came to my mind. So I grew up in Huntington, Long Island, and my father died when I was young, and my mother went back to school at UC Berkeley. So we moved to Berkeley in 1968, and my mom, single mom now, was trying to give us some kind of education. So she took us to a few plays, and she took us to one play that I remember. A character came on stage and went, "Shit!" And I thought this. So I did that for about a year and a half. Afterwards, I was inspired. My mother was inspired to never take me to another play without really checking it out ahead of time.
This is growing up. We saw we listened to the music of the chorus line a lot, and there's a very famous song in a chorus line known as, of course, "Tits and Ass," which was me and my sister's favorite. And I have a pretty big singing voice. Like I've always had a big voice, and boy, did I belt that thing out at age like 5.
I can see the two of you doing that. Oh man.
Yep. Proud mom. All right, last one. Here we go. What is one word or phrase? And I'm going to go back to your teaching days on this one.
Okay.
One word or phrase that you said most often to your students when you were teaching them. Something that, like, if I called one of them and was like, "What is the ultimate Jeff-ism?" What would they say?
Oh, boy. God, I wrote a book about it, so I should have some of them right there. I'm going to borrow one. Probably not the one I said most, but it's the one I'm saying most now. And I'm borrowing from a dear friend and teacher, Avner Eisenberg, Avner the eccentric. It's be interested, not interesting.
I love that. Oh, that's so good.
It works in every way you possibly can want. It is the whole thing of not being self-conscious, but conscious of others. And it is it's a core idea for a clown. It's really a lot what we've been talking about, this core idea for a clown that works really well for a teacher. And it's not such a bad thing for parents either.
Yeah. Be interested, not interesting. I think that is a core idea. It goes right back to listening and being present and all of those wonderful things. Jeff, thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you about all of these things. And I know that you have a million exciting other adventures happening. Is there anything else you wanted to talk to us about before we head out?
No, I just mentioned that the current answer to the question of creativity is actually answered. I'm working on a play. I got commissioned to do a play, which is a lovely thing coming out of the lockdown, for California Revels. And it's the new artistic director was in a cast of a Make a Circus show that I directed 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So it's wonderful to be working with someone who you directed when they were a teenager.
Oh, that is such a good full circle moment. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Jeff. We'll talk to you later, okay?
Bye bye, Nina.
So much fun to talk to Jeff today. Oh my goodness. What an amazing human being he is, and what fascinating adventures he has had on stage and off. As I'm reflecting on listening to what he had to say, I think the word that it just keeps popping up to me is that idea of listening, and how we as humans are just better at everything when we have truly open ears to listen to what is happening around us and respond, right? Listen and respond. And as parents, it's really easy for us to think we're listening, or I don't know, I find myself a lot doing the sort of pretend listening. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Anyone else ever do that? But what does it mean to truly listen to our children, and to stop and slow down and take those deep breaths and listen and respond? And in theater, we have a lot of activities and games that are all about listening and responding. And one thing you can try with your family, it's a super simple game. It's just about making sounds. It's called Sound Ball. And you can do this at the dining room table. You could do it when you're waiting in line at the grocery store. And it's really simple. So the first person makes a sound and throws the imaginary ball at another person. So let's say I went, whee! And then the other person has to catch the ball using the same sound that I made. Whee! And then they throw it to the next person with a new sound. Bee-bonk. And then that person catches it. Bee-bonk with the same sound. And while this is like super, it feels silly and kids like it because it's easy and fun, what it's doing is actually, if you're playing with your kid, it's giving them that reinforcement that you are listening. I heard your sound. I'm repeating it back, and I'm letting it transform into something else, a new creative impulse. So I hope you were as inspired by Jeff as I was. Definitely, anytime we can listen to our kids is always phenomenal, but sometimes we can just use little creative ways to do it, like the sound game. You can actually also do listening visually, meaning I draw something on a paper. So my child draws something, and then I take that same paper and I get my own paper and I draw my version of what they drew. It's still that same idea of listening and responding. And then they can take my drawing and use that to respond and draw something new. And then I can copy or repeat what they're drawing. So that's visual listening. So many different ways to listen. So much fun. I hope you enjoyed Jeff.